Hey everybody, just wanted to make a video giving you an update of what's going on in the Middle East. Hope you're having a good Sunday. And I also have some notes to share with you guys regarding how I think World War III might play out and why. So this article came out from TASS news agency. UN spokesman, any conflict at Syrian-Turkish border can get beyond control, and the situation at the Syrian-Turkish border only builds up tensions in the region and stresses the necessity of a swift settlement of the Syrian crisis. And saying it can spin out of control, and that Turkey's plan to deploy its troops in northern Syria would be a bad idea, and to basically de-escalate what's going on, while at the same time, when Russia comes out and kind of says the same thing and asks the UN to tell Turkey to stop shelling over the border in Syria, the UN says no, and France says no, and the US says no, and they all think it's some sort of ploy by Russia trying to distract the world from its air campaign in support of the Syrian regime, and they're urging Russia to abide by UN resolutions supporting a peace process. So they're just completely contradicting themselves, the United Nations are, and it's getting ridiculous. So, and they could stop this at any time. They could kick Turkey out of NATO. They could, force Erdogan's hand on to stop shelling into Syria, stop shelling the Kurds, which would lead to World War III eventually, and they just refuse to do so. It's like almost like say your husband was beating your kids and the wife went to the cops and asked the cops for their help, and the cops basically said, screw you, you're on your own. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever for them to refuse this bid by Russia. I mean, that tells you right there they want this war to happen, in my opinion. So, and then Erdogan is stating they have the right to conduct special ops in Syria elsewhere to protect itself from terrorists, saying, they can carry out military operations not only in Syria but in any other country in the world which is hosting terror groups that threaten the Turkish state. So just more warmongering coming out of this psychopath in Turkey. So so as I stated in my other videos, and you guys are seeing right now, ISIS is about to be finished in Syria because of the encroachment and bombardments of Syrian and Russian forces. Once that happens, once ISIS is totally gone from Syria, and the US, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia at that point have zero reason to be involved in the conflict, yet they continue to warmonger, call Assad a brutal dictator, and must be removed by force, and blame Putin for the continuous buildup of his forces on Russia's western borders, when in fact it was NATO who positioned their forces along the eastern borders of Russia first. And let's not forget that Russia was invited in the first place by Syria, and the US was not. So Syria is a sovereign nation, and the US is basically trying to take control of their country. And the reason why is because they're attempting to avoid the end of the unilateral hegemony of the American empire in the Middle East. And after the 9/11 false flag, we all know about, we invaded Iraq for the same reason. It's now a known fact Saddam Hussein had no weapons of mass destruction, and the reason for the invasion was because Iraq challenged the supremacy of the dollar and the Western banks. So the same thing is being played out in Syria, and eventually will be played out in Iran as well. But instead of WMDs, they're using ISIS and the threat of terrorism as their smokescreen to invade Syria, then eventually prop up the dollar, snatch their oil and trade routes. And Libya, Syria, and Iran are not part of the Bank for International Settlements, and that basically puts them outside the regulatory arm of the Western central bankers. And not only that, but Iran just came out saying that they're not going to be trading in the petrodollar, they're going to be trading in euros. So that's a huge move by Iran. And so after the US is done with Syria, they'll finish up their scheme by taking control of Iran. But of course Russia is involved this time, and we're on the brink of World War III because of the Western elitist greed. And so Turkey, is saying they'll do whatever they need to do to protect their country from terrorism and the Kurds and what have you, and they'll somehow use that excuse to invade Syria, in my opinion. Or if they're dumb enough, which they are, they'll use ISIS to blame for some kind of false flag attack that occurs in the near future, because they are stating right now, from this article in TASS at the bottom, it actually goes on to state that the Financial Times said on Friday Turkey is planning to deploy troops in Syria's northern provinces, whereas Saudi Arabia seeks to deploy troops in the south. And so they're still, pushing for this invasion with Saudi Arabia. So they need a big reason to justify their invasion, and this could easily be another false flag like they did the other day with the bus bombing of the Turkish Air Force pilots, but it would have to be much, much bigger, like a thermonuclear device going off maybe at the southern border of Turkey, or even maybe in one of Turkey's central cities. So in that article that came out last week that I showed you guys about regarding the missing radioactive material that was stolen in Iraq a few months ago by ISIS could easily be our warning and our clue for the coming false flag attack having to do with Syria and the invasion, Turkey and the invasion of Syria. So the U.S. and NATO are not backing the invasion of Turkey at this point. So there might have to be a false flag attack that happens on U.S. soil as well as European soil. Even though Turkey's a NATO member, you know, if Turkey does get attacked like that, you know, they could justify their invasion, but in my opinion, they need something more than that to commit ground troops and convince the American public that we're going to war. So once Turkey and Saudi Arabia have invaded Syria, World War III will have officially commenced, and NATO and Russia, of course, have their troops positioned on the border of Russia. And at the same time, there's going to be an event in the Korean Peninsula, most likely, with all the buildup over there and warmongering over there, possibly a EMP attack or terrorist attack in South Korea that would be blamed on North Korea. These articles came out the other day from CNBC, came out yesterday. North Korea's arsenal raises the stakes for U.S. grid security, going on to talk about EMP threats and how it would destroy our grid, how our grids are vulnerable, and blah, blah, blah. And just more, you know, these have been coming out for months and months, but they've been trying to desensitize us to the fact. And now I think the fact that they're coming out now and the timing, I think could be some sort of warning that we might expect some sort of EMP from, you know, maybe North Korea's satellite that's hovering above us right now, or passes over us, you know, 10 times a day to be used as an EMP attack. So, and South Korea as well, they're warning of planned terror attacks by North Korea. Apparently they have information that North Korea is planning a terror attack in South Korea. So that would give justification for the Pacific Theater to kick off and the war to start over there. You know, so China, of course, you know, they're being provocative as well as the U.S. over there with the disputed islands, and they're prepared for war over there. So, so World War III might actually consist of a three-front war, with the U.S. and NATO fighting from the east and Russia fighting from the west, while at the same time South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and possibly Australia in the Pacific-based U.S. forces would fight North Korea, China, and possibly India. And then, of course, we would have U.S., Israel, and Saudi Arabia and Turkey fighting in Syria, Iran, and other Arab Axis countries. So we all remember World War II. They were fighting on two fronts. Germany was dealing with Western allies on the west and the Soviets on the east. And at the same time, the U.S. was fighting the European theater against Nazi Germany, and then Japan in the Pacific War. So, and of course, they were all started by false flag attacks, Pearl Harbor, Gulf of Tonkin, Lusitania, all that great stuff. So the million-dollar question, in my opinion, hasn't really been answered, but is one of the most important ones that needs answering. Is Putin going along with the New World Order agenda, or is he indeed trying to save us from it somehow? They have the BRICS nations and the banks formed and have continuously been selling off U.S. treasuries and trading in their own currencies and basically bypassing the U.S. dollar altogether. And, you know, I've seen articles that state that Putin has his own bosses to answer to, his own masters, and he's anti-New World Order, and, you know, has rid his country of the Rothschild banks and control. But at the same time, I've read articles where he's just another puppet controlled by Kissinger and the other Western elitists, and is indeed buddies with Obama, and they're just using this world as their stage to act out the biggest play in the history of the world. So I'd love to hear what you guys have to say on the subject. Feel free to leave your comments below and let me know, because, you know, we're trying to seek out the truth and get the word out as best we can. So on that note, have a good Sunday, and I will see you in my next video. Take care.